I've silence that said everything. The room was too quiet for how many people were in it. 7, maybe 8 bodies, all dressed in shades of formality. Gray, navy, black, but no warmth, not even the illusion of it. You could have dropped a pin, and it would have echoed off the marble floors like a scream. I sat at the far end of the table, a soft click each time I shifted on the stiff leather chair. My coat was still damp from the morning drizzle, and I hadn't removed it. Maybe I didn't plan to stay long. Maybe I knew deep down there would be nothing here for me. Celeste, of course, sat at the head. She always claimed the power seat, like it was stitched into her spine. Hair pulled into a perfect French twist. No flyaways, no imperfections. Her blouse was the color of bone china, and her eyes never flickered from the stack of papers in front of her. On either side of her were 2 attorneys in nearly matching suits, eyes lowered, pens tapping in unison. The lawyer, Mr. Dern, cleared his throat with practiced authority. We're here to execute the last will and testament of the late Jonathan Parrish. There was no, I'm sorry for your loss, not anymore. It had been just over 3 weeks since Jonathan died. Long enough for sympathy to feel performative, but not long enough for the ache in my chest to dull. Per his request, Dern continued, this reading is formal, documented, and final. I gave a small nod. Not that anyone looked at me. Celeste leaned slightly forward, her voice clipped and pristine. As Jonathan's wife and sole executive of his estate, I've ensured all relevant documents have been reviewed and validated. I expected it. Her control, her tone, her distance. What I didn't expect, what no part of me had prepared for, was what came next. There are no distributions allocated to Miss Evelyn Hart under the current will. The words sat there in the air like smoke. Not cruel, not dramatic, just cold. No one turned toward me. No one gasped. No one even blinked. The paralegal by the door glanced up briefly, then dropped her eyes. One of the suited men shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Dern gave the faintest pause, as if debating whether to continue, then simply, did primary control of the Parish Charitable Trust, the Parish Arts Endowment, and the South Cove Real Estate Holdings shall remain under Mrs. Celeste Parrish's management. It went on like that for another 6 minutes. Bullet points, numbers, legal phrasing that drained every drop of human emotion from the room. By the time the final document was laid flat on the table, I felt like a ghost, not erased, with malice, just omitted, like I had never been there. Except I had been, every day, for 12 years. I had been there. The rain picked up as I stepped outside. I didn't open my umbrella. I walked down the courthouse steps slowly, counting them without realizing. 8 steps, same number as people in the room. At the curb, I paused. My hands itched to dial someone, anyone. But who? Jonathan was gone, and I no longer had a name that belonged in the world he left behind. The house was already changing. It was subtle at first. A new doorbell, a different scent in the hallway, vanilla now. Instead of sandalwood, Celeste moved fast. She always had. The framed portrait of Jonathan that once sat on the foyer table was missing. So was the ceramic bowl we used to toss our keys into. In its place, a glass dish filled with smooth, white pebbles. Clean, soulless. In the dining room, a thick white envelope sat on the table. My name on the front. No Dear Evelyn. No handwritten message. Just Evelyn Hart. Final personal items inside were 3 things. A scarf I had knit for Jonathan during his 2nd round of chemo. A photo album with a torn spine and 2 pages missing. A chipped coffee mug with the phrase "Create Light" barely legible from years of use. That was it. 12 years reduced to a scarf, a mug, and a few silent photographs. I didn't cry. Not right then. Instead, I walked into Jonathan's study. Celeste had cleaned it, scrubbed it free of memory. His desk, once cluttered with notes and journals, sat almost eerily bare. The walls were stripped of the degrees and sketches he used to proudly display. Even his worn brown reading chair was gone, replaced with a sleek, modern one that still had the tag hanging from the leg. I opened the desk drawer, the one that always stuck, still stuck. Some things resist change, even when everything else gives in. I pulled harder. It jerked open an inch. Inside, receipts, an old pen, a broken bookmark. But under the lining paper, something sharp snagged my finger. I peeled it back. A thin, yellowed envelope lay hidden underneath. No name, no address, just a single line scribbled in Jonathan's handwriting. If she's reading this, it means I didn't have time. I froze. For a moment, I just held it. Like it might burn me. Like it might bleed if I opened it too fast. My hands trembled as I peeled it open. Inside were 3 folded sheets of paper. The first, in Jonathan's unmistakable hand, read, "Celeste says, we need to update the estate. Says it's time to reflect reality." I told her, "You're part of my reality." She didn't answer. I don't know what she's planning, but if anything feels off, Evelyn, find the old file. The one in the safe at the studio. You'll know which one. I trust you. And I'm sorry I waited this long. My breath caught in my throat. The studio. Jonathan's private art space. He used to say. It was where he went to breathe between battles. It had been locked since his diagnosis worsened. He said the light was too harsh for him, that it made his eyes ache. But now I knew better. He had hidden something, and if Celeste had gone to such lengths to wipe me from his life, then maybe, just maybe, he had tried to protect me before she could. I found the key on my third pass through the house, tucked inside the spine of a music book only I would ever think to check. It was his way of telling me, I knew. You'd come looking. The studio was only 2 blocks from the house, nestled behind the old glass-blowing shop. The door creaked open slowly. The air inside was stale with dust and turpentine, but the space was untouched. His easel still stood by the window. The half-finished canvas blues and golds swirling into a storm leaned patiently against the wall, and in the corner, behind a stack of crates labeled "Don't Move," was the safe. My hands shook as I turned the dial. Left, right, left again. Click. It swung open. Inside were 3 things: a brown leather folder labeled Original Will Draft 202, a flash drive, and a single photograph of me, arms wrapped around Jonathan, laughing in the rain. I opened the folder first, and there it was. My name, not just in the acknowledgments, but in the heart of the will, joint co-founder and trustee of the Parish Charitable Trust, designated housing rights for the South Cove residents, executor of Legacy Project grant distributions. My breath hitched. He had included me. He had written it, signed it, and kept it. Then, something changed. Something or someone rewrote that future. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Inside, emails, scanned contracts, audio notes. Dozens of them. One in particular was titled, April 9 Call with C. I pressed play. Jonathan's voice, faint, raspy, but clear. You said it wouldn't feel like erasure, but it does. You said Evelyn wouldn't mind, but you never asked her. If you love me, Celeste, stop rushing this. My heart cracked open. He had fought, even in his final days. He had fought for me, for truth. I closed the laptop slowly, my chest pounding. Celeste had rewritten the will. But Jonathan had left me the pen, and what was stolen, and what could be reclaimed. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I curled under the blanket Jonathan once called, our tent against the storm, stared at the ceiling, and counted each breath like I used to, during his bad chemo days. But my mind wouldn't stop. The flash drive, the folder, that voice recording. Jonathan had left me a trail, and Celeste had buried it. By morning, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse, focused. I called Julian first. He was the only person I knew who would believe me before the evidence. The same Julian who co-founded the trust with Jonathan back in '09. When none of us had any money, just ideas and insomnia. He picked up on the third ring. Evelyn? His voice still had that gentle gravel I remembered from late-night grant meetings. I need to show you something, I said. Jonathan tried to protect me. She just got there first. We met that afternoon. At a quiet cafe across from the courthouse. He arrived early, a stack of old files already open on the table. He hadn't changed much, same tired cardigan, same quiet eyes. I slid the flash drive across the table and opened the brown leather folder. Julian read silently, jaw tightening with every page. When he reached the signed draft, the one that named me trustee, he closed the folder and leaned back slowly. She said Jonathan didn't want anything contested. He said after a moment that he wanted a clean transition. That's what she told everyone. I said, but he never stopped fighting. She just waited him out. Julian nodded. I can call Sasha. Sasha Ellis. Estate law. Former partner at Dun & Bright. She'd retired 2 years ago, but everyone still trusted her word. He tapped his pen once on the table. And there's Willa. Willa? She used to work for Celeste. Paralegal. Smart, quiet, got out fast. What does she know? He shrugged. I don't know, but I've seen that look before. On you, on Jonathan. When someone's carrying something too heavy for too long. Willa agreed to meet us the next day. We sat in the back corner of a diner off Willow Creek. Julian ordered us all coffee. Willa barely touched hers. She was younger than I expected, maybe 33, but her eyes were older. I don't want to lose my job, she said first. I've got a daughter. I didn't think anyone would ever ask. I'm not looking for revenge, I said. Just the truth. She took a shaky breath, then opened her satchel. From it, she pulled a wrinkled notepad and a printed copy of an email chain. Her hand shook slightly as she passed them over. The night Jonathan's estate was updated, Celeste called me back to the office, Willa said. It was a Sunday. I remember because my daughter had a fever, and I was angry for having to leave. Her voice cracked. I never saw Jonathan. He wasn't there. But she told me to witness the signature. She said it was urgent. You didn't see him sign? Julian asked. Willa shook her head. She said he'd already approved everything, that it was a formality, but something felt wrong. So when I got home, I wrote down the time and the way she said it, just in case. The notepad said, 9:12 p.m. Sunday, no presents. Celeste insisted. Urgent signature. Said he's on board. Beneath, that Willa had written in her own shaky handwriting. He wasn't there. I knew it. By the time we left the diner, the fog in my head had lifted. I finally knew what I was chasing. It wasn't just about my name. It was about Jonathan's legacy and how it was being weaponized by the one person who had always claimed she was protecting it. Sasha Ellis came to my apartment the next evening, dressed in a loose gray coat and carrying a black leather briefcase. She shook my hand gently and spoke like she was delivering a verdict with each word. She reviewed everything. The flash drive, Willa's statement, Jonathan's draft. This isn't just suspicious, she said. It's actionable. My stomach twisted. You mean I can sue? You could. Fraud, coercion, executor misconduct. But if you ask me, she closed the folder slowly. The cleanest way is through public correction. If what you want is the truth on paper, not a payout. Julian looked at me. That's what he would have wanted, Evelyn. Quiet truth, permanent truth. I nodded. How do we do it? The next morning, we filed a petition for historical correction, not a lawsuit, not a press scandal, just a legal motion requesting that Jonathan's original will draft be preserved in the county archive as a protected historical document, one that acknowledged disputed intentions during a medical crisis. We included the signed draft with my name and his note, metadata from the fake signature timestamp, Willa's witness note and sworn statement, the recorded conversation from April 9. Sasha added her own declaration, citing strong indicators of medical vulnerability and potential document manipulation. It wasn't about dragging Celeste down. It was about lifting Jonathan's truth up so it could breathe in public light. The invitation arrived 4 days later. Navy cardstock, silver lettering, the Jonathan Parrish Legacy Gala, Celeste's name printed beneath his, continuing his vision. The irony felt cruel. I stared at the RSVP line. I wasn't invited, but someone had slid a second card underneath, a smaller note, handwritten. You should be there. He'd want you to see. J. Julian. That night, I wore the black dress Jonathan loved, the one he said made me look like a symphony in motion. No one recognized me at first. The room was full of tailored suits and perfect teeth. Champagne flutes clinked like polite lies. Donors nodded at each other like currency. Celeste stood at the podium, black silk gown, perfect posture, voice smooth as silk. She spoke of Jonathan's brilliance, his vision, his trust and legacy. She didn't speak of me. Not once. When the speech ended, the lights dimmed for the slideshow. Jonathan's face filled the screen, young, laughing, painting in the studio, teaching children in the garden. The audience smiled, but something shifted when one particular photo appeared, a candid of Jonathan and me, wrapped in a blanket under the stars, laughing like idiots. That photo had never been released publicly. I looked over. Julian gave me the faintest nod. He'd added it to the program without telling her. The room paused. A few glances turned toward me. Celeste saw me then. Her expression faltered. For the first time, she looked afraid. After the program, I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to. Instead, I handed a sealed envelope to the foundation's board chair. Mr. Dalrymple. Inside, the original will, Willa's sworn statement, Sasha's legal recommendation, and Jonathan's recording. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. the kind that doesn't scream. It just stands still until people finally have to look. 2 days later, the board called an emergency session. Celeste withdrew her appointment that evening. No apology. No explanation. Just a graceful retreat disguised as dignity. She'd lost. But not because I took anything from her. Because she tried to take what wasn't hers and I refused to let it go quietly. What still belongs to me. The morning after Celeste stepped down, I woke before sunrise. Not out of anxiety, or anger, or strategy, but because something inside me had stilled. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel like I was trying to scream through glass. I didn't check my phone, didn't refresh the news, didn't call Julian. I just sat in the old armchair by the window, Jonathan's armchair, the one Celeste had removed. But Julian had recovered from storage and let the quiet settle around me like a soft coat. The truth had been spoken, not loudly. Not for applause, but clearly. And now, there was nothing left to prove, only something left to feel. That afternoon, a plain manila envelope slid through my mail slot. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of stationery. Jonathan's handwriting. If Evelyn reads this, it means she held on longer than anyone else would have. And I want that known. There was no date, no signature, just those 3 lines. The kind of thing someone writes when they aren't sure how much longer they have. The kind of thing you leave behind not as evidence, but as memory. And memory, when left untouched, becomes a kind of truth more permanent than law. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried for the first time since the will reading. Not because I had lost, but because after everything, I had finally been seen. Julian and I walked the garden path 3 days later. He held the box. I held the letter. The foundation board had voted unanimously that morning to reinstate me as co-founder and permanent legacy advisor. They updated the legal charter, publicized the correction, and opened the archives to include the original documents, Jonathan's early will, the flash drive, even Willa's note. Everything that had once been hidden now had a shelf, a label, a record. You don't have to stay involved, Julian said as we approached the memorial tree. This can be where it ends. I smiled faintly. No, this is where it begins again, but only the part that matters. The tree stood tall now, its roots deeper, its branches spread wide. It was the first thing Jonathan and I planted together, before the money came, before the board members in suits, before Celeste walked in with her polished shoes and her airtight contracts, back when legacy was just another word for love, translated into time. A new plaque had been added to the base of the tree. It didn't name me, but it read, "In honor of those who built quietly, stayed quietly, and remained when no one was watching." That was enough. 2 weeks passed. I didn't check the news, didn't read the press statements, but one letter caught my attention. It arrived by courier, embossed with the foundation's new seal. Inside, "We acknowledge the error in recent estate procedures and reaffirm your role in the foundation's history and future. As per the updated articles, your name will be included in all archival materials, with full co-founder status effective immediately." It was signed by every board member, even the one who had once whispered, "I thought she was just the girlfriend." I didn't reply, didn't need to. I just closed the letter, walked to the kitchen, and pulled Jonathan's chipped mug from the cupboard, poured myself some tea, and sat down in his chair. There was no dramatic victory speech, no courtroom scene, no spotlight moment where I stood over Celeste's defeat. That's not how real justice works. Sometimes, it's quieter, like a single sentence returned to the page where it once was erased, or a signature reprinted where it was once crossed out, or a name spoken aloud again after too long in silence. Months passed. Spring faded into summer, and the garden bloomed wider than ever before. No one remembered who first planted the lilies, or why Jonathan had always chosen blue hydrangeas for the west fence, but I did. I remembered, and when new volunteers asked how the foundation started, I smiled gently and said, it began with a single grant, a lot of hope, and 2 people who believed in quiet work. I didn't need them to know the rest. The truth was already planted in the archives, in ink, in court, in history. I visited the county archives once. Months later, the clerk led me to a file labeled Jonathan Parish Estate Correction, Legacy Motion 14B. Inside were all the documents, my name printed and protected, his letter, Willa's note, Sasha's legal statement, Julian's written account of the transition. At the very back, behind the stiff legal filings, one image had been included, A photograph of Jonathan and me, standing in front of the tree, smiling. You could barely see the garden blooming behind us, but I remembered how it smelled, like lavender, and memory, and the kind of peace that can only grow where truth has finally taken root. The end, the room was too quiet for how many people were in it, a story of quiet erasure, quiet resistance, and quiet triumph.